Hello, my name is Ben Greaves, and I want to give a huge shout out to both the CHASM organizing team as well as SGAC's Space Medicine and Life Science team for selecting me for this essay competition, as well as putting on the CHASM conference in Cambridge this spring. It's been such a great way to network with other people in the Analogue astronaut community, and I'm really excited to tell you about my experiment idea. So what my paper explored was not just an individual experiment, but a scope of experiments that looked to study not the relationship between crew members in an astronaut analog, but the relationship between a crew member and mission control. A crew member and someone not within the analog that might not be experiencing the hardships that are felt by the crew in the analog. And the reason that I want to explore this was because it's something that we very rarely investigate, yet something that is critical when we move forward. As we move to the moon, as we move to Mars, we're going to be constantly relying on Earth and on mission control and on our help back on Earth in order to make sure that our missions are successful. We do this right now all the time with the International Space Station, constantly helping astronauts that might not be specific experts in the particular experiment, but are aided and helped with some of the different operating procedures through an expert that's on Earth. And so we need to make sure that that is a healthy relationship that is well explored and well documented in order to mitigate some of the more psychological and relationship risks that can be brought up in future space travel. For example, during an astronaut analog known as During an astronaut analog that happened in the 1960s, the crew found that the stresses and dangers they faced on a day-to-day basis were so alien to the ordinary surface experience that they felt topside support could not understand their situation and was not in a position to issue them orders or advice. I feel like that's not ideal for a mission. In addition, everyone from the surface, whether issuing orders or bringing supplies, became an unwelcome outsider in their eyes. And this happened nearly 60 years ago. We need to find solutions to this relationship and to this problem if we are to sustainably move out to the moon and to Mars, where we're going to need to continue to rely on the help of our Earth-bound mission control. So, being the space agricultural engineer that I am, I looked to design an experiment that would incorporate both an expert in plant growth on the outside, helping an analog astronaut who is not an expert in plant growth within an analog in a plant growth experiment that would not only explore this relationship, but also delve into some science of its own. For this particular experiment design, I was inspired by my time at the HI-SEAS astronaut analog, where I conducted a plant growth experiment for 2 weeks at the end of November 2020. Specifically, at HI-SEAS, as we do with most analogs, we look to use the most of our resources. Now, with that in mind, I noticed that we ended up dumping out a lot of the water that was collected in our dehumidifier system. And it got me thinking of how can we utilize this water, since we're taking such extreme measures in other places to make the most of our water. How can we use this water that is sourced differently, and it's simply collected from the air and perhaps put through a few membranes to be collected, but how can we utilize this water in a way that not only adds to the amount of water that is allowed per mission, but also just is a process that allows the astronauts in the analog to think of other creative ways that you can utilize resources that you typically wouldn't think of. As this experiment is only for 2 weeks, the best plant to grow for this experiment are microgreens, as they are the only ones that would be able to grow to full maturation. To start, the astronaut would separate 2 seed quilts into 2 separate trays, one which would be watered with traditionally sourced water, and the other would be watered with water previously collected from the analog's dehumidifier system. However, steps like these will be unknown to the astronaut until after they begin the analog in order to ensure that any assistance that they require from the support staff will only be gained under analog conditions. This includes the communication delay, limited communication methods, and any other steps that the astronaut needs to take in order to speak with mission control. Finally, in order to understand the communication between the mission support and the astronaut, different commands will be sent throughout the mission, both unplanned and planned, in order to test their communication. Unplanned could include changing environmental conditions, intervening with sensor malfunction, or adding more water to the trays. Planned commands include a series of measurements taken every 3 days, in which the support staff will instruct the astronaut to prune specific individual microgreens as a test to see how well they can communicate. After these planned commands are executed, the support staff, the analog astronaut working with the experiment, and another analog astronaut will conduct a small survey regarding the relationship between the support staff and the member of the astronaut in order to best understand how well their relationship is doing. And on the last day of the mission, the astronaut will harvest both sets of microgreens and measure the fresh mass of each group in order to see how well each group of plants did, and we can see if the dehumidifier water is a possible source of water for these plant growth experiments. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, please email me here.